It's the Church of Jesus Christ. Stephen, with the election just days away, what should we be focused on?
You know, as always, we should be focused on a sovereign God who's at work. And I really want to say, especially in this time in our national history, Christians need to be hanging on to the fact that God rules. And I'm sure that's a theme we'll come back to time and again. But in political issues, we got to look at the core issues that we care about. Yes, character and the elected leaders, but of course abortion, of course the LGBTQ agenda, of course freedom of speech, of course freedom of religion. Those are the issues that we ought to be measuring this election by. So we should calm down, we should trust God, and we should keep our eye on the ball, which are these core issues that believers should care about.
We've talked about this on the program before, but I think it's important to reiterate. Why should Christians vote even if the candidates are far from perfect?
Well, thank you for setting me up with that question. It's an issue I care about very much. We tend to have a belief system that when we vote, we're voting between complete good and complete evil. Well, nothing in that world, in this world, is like that. I mean, my wife and I'm crazy about my wife. She's not perfect. I'm not perfect as a husband. So I often like to joke and say that when we make political decisions or we vote, we're choosing between hold your nose and hold your nose tighter. I have been voting for, 45 years in my life? I have never placed a vote I was 100% happy with. So we've got to move away from a perfectionism. We've got to move away from a belief that, hey, I'm not going to vote unless I have the absolute perfect candidate. And the other thing we need to know is that many times we don't fully know what God intends and ultimately what's going to happen. We've had extremely liberal presidents make conservative decisions. We've had liberal presidents make the reverse. We've done it time and time again and seen God superintend, seen decisions not go the right way. We just need to calm down and make the best decisions we can make at the time and not expect anyone to be perfect or refuse to vote if we don't have the perfect option.
Once this election is over, what are some things Christians should have in mind, no matter what the outcome is?
You know, I've been spending a lot of time in Daniel, the book of Daniel. And the whole message of the book of Daniel is that God is working in the lives even of demon-worshiping pagan kings. He's given them dreams, he's talking to them, he's trying to draw them to him. So even if the election doesn't go the way that you think it ought to go, if it doesn't go the way that voters think it ought to go, they still need to trust there's a sovereign God. He does as he wishes with the peoples of the earth. Psalm 75 says he sets one up and puts another down. Promotion doesn't come from the east or west, it comes from the Lord. So I keep hammering this issue of a sovereign God. And by the way, whoever wins the election, it doesn't change the mandate on the church. The church still needs to be salt and light. We still need to be serving in the community. We still need to be converting believers and preaching the gospel. And frankly, it'll be more desperate after this election, whoever wins, than perhaps ever in our nation. So that's what we need to keep our eyes on.
For the church, there inevitably is always going to be a candidate or a law that is passed and a candidate that gets elected that discourages us. What do we do with that discouragement?
Well, turn it to the Lord, cry out to him. He's the ruler of nations. He determines who leads and how things go. But also take confidence in the fact that things are not as they often appear on the news. One of the things I spend a good deal of time doing is talking to people off of their frantic feelings because they've been watching the news. Things rarely go in Washington, D.C. the way people intend for them to go. They are almost never the way the press says they are. And so don't freak out is the t-shirt I'm going to walk around wearing. Don't freak out. God's in charge. Things are frankly in better shape than most of us believe. And we have to understand, continue to pray, continue to vote, continue to do local level political action, and trust that God's in charge and that good things are going to happen.
Help put this election in historical perspective. How important is what's coming up this week?
I think it's incredibly important. In fact, I know it's been overworked as the go-to election, but I do believe this election is very much like 1860, Abraham Lincoln running for office, the nation divided over slavery and other issues. It's interesting, the parallels. Lincoln even ran against a sitting U.S. vice president. This is a critical election between two competing worldviews. I know that the issue of worldview is not surfacing a lot in our politics with all the insults and the craziness. But this is a critical election between two competing worldviews, and this election will determine a great deal that will happen in the next decades and even for the next generation.
Stephen, the pro-life agenda is an ongoing work here in America, particularly for the church. We've seen incredible victories like we saw in 2022 with the Dobbs case and the overturning of Roe. In this election, there are a number of amendments at the state level that have the potential to enshrine abortion into the state constitution. Regardless of the outcome, why does the pro-life agenda and the pro-life work here in America need to still continue, and why is it such an important issue for the church?
Well, we certainly want laws that reflect life, but if we impose the values of life in the laws without having changed hearts and minds, we're going to have an angry reaction that will simply reverse those laws in time. We're seeing a bit of that now. So the pro-life movement has got to be about convincing people, hey, the science is with us, the history is with us. And so if we are doing the job of converting minds, converting hearts, converting people to Jesus, teaching the science, getting the message out, changing hearts and minds, we won't just see laws imposing a value system, we'll see a nation turning to new values. And that's what we want. We want cultural renewal. We want a culture of life. And that will only come if we do our jobs.
There are a number of issues that the church just can't stop fighting for, whether it is the sanctity of life or the sanctity of marriage and the family, religious liberty. Why does the church, regardless of the outcome of the election, need to continue to advance these critical issues in this cultural moment?
Well, this is one of the issues that I care very much about. One of my favorite Christian scholars wrote a book called The Messianic Nature of American Politics. And his point was that people look at politics almost in messianic terms. If we just have the right guy in office or woman in office, if we just have the right person doing this, if we just have the right laws, we'll have the kingdom of God in America. Well, we know it's not true. Very rarely does anything coming out of Washington or the state capitol do the entire job for us. So we've got to be busy at the grassroots level. We've got to be changing minds. We've got to be lobbying. We've got to work at local laws. We've got to convert people. We've got to get books in people's hands and do podcasts like this and change thinking, because that's ultimately what's going to bring the renewal. And by the way, always behind that is the gospel. You got to change hearts, not just change minds. So whoever wins the next morning, I hope every believer in America gets up and says, okay, now we get to work. Rather than, oh good, so-and-so won, and so now it's done, or so-and-so won and now it's over. Both of those perspectives are ungodly. We've got to get to work the next morning like we never have before.